and I'll hand it over to you, Callie.
Wonderful, wonderful. Good evening, everybody, and many thanks to the Friends of the Library for inviting us to talk about the Blue Hill Garden Club, our place that many of you may have had questions about this wonderful garden, which is just growing leaps and bounds across from Arborvine. Who is responsible for this? Where do the vegetables go? And how can I get involved? Well, we're here to answer all those questions tonight. We have three presenters. One of our presenters is not here tonight, but for very good reason. Susan Brookman's having her second shot or had it today, so she's not going to be here to present. So our three speakers will be Peter Leonard, who's president of the Garden Club, and he's going to talk about the history and how we got involved in this effort. The second presenter will be Rachel Emus, who is going to talk about how we plant, how we choose the veggies that we plant, and where they go at the end, and how it supports the community. And Hillary Warren will speak about how the garden works for all ages of volunteers. Please write your questions if you have any in the chat room, and I'll be keeping track of those. We'll have time for questions at the end. I will now pass it over to Peter Leonard.
Oh, good evening. I'm Peter Leonard, and just to give you a short history of this garden, it all started about 2 years ago when we got some new young members of the club, and we also got some boxes made for us by John Warren, at McVeigh's garage. And so we had these boxes, and one of our new members, Rachel, suggested that we plant vegetables in them. So we did that. And we also took a trip to Millbridge, where they have what they call Incredible Edible Millbridge. And they have 2 community gardens, and they also encourage businesses and homes to grow vegetables rather than flowers. So that was an eye-opener, and we thought with the success of the boxes and that we might want to expand the effort. So we went to GSA, who owns the land on Tenney Hill where the dorm is, and because we had seen they have a lot of lawn there. So we approached them and asked if we could use some of that to do a community garden. And they enthusiastically approved. So that fall, we rototilled 1,600 square feet. We put down a lot of manure and leaves, and then left it for the winter. Meanwhile, some grants or we did some grant writing and applied for some grants, which were granted from the New England Grassroots Fund and the Maine Farmland Trust. So that gave us the money to proceed. The next spring, we built a tool shed and a deer fence, made the beds and amended them, and started gardening. GSA, 2 of their classes started seeds for us, like onions and celery and stuff that has to be started before. And then we planted them. Of course, was that? Oh yeah, that was, COVID came along, right? That's right. So GSA couldn't stay involved, but we managed to do a lot of planting and harvesting. Rachel will tell you how much we did and all. And then in the fall, of course, we planted things like garlic and cover crops, and then mulched it and put it to bed. This spring, we've already started planting peas and radishes and lettuce and carrots, and we've started a lot of plants indoors. And again, GSA has cooperated, and 2 of their classes have started plantings. So basically, that's the history. When we started it was we thought of it as a collaboration. The garden club would actually grow the produce, and then Healthy Acadia and Rachel would distribute it. And it seems to have worked out pretty well. This summer, one thing we're going to do is we've got some raised beds that are going in, and we will have some educational demonstrations every Saturday at 10 a.m. We'll be demonstrating how to plant whatever has to be planted at that time, or to transplant. So that's kind of our new effort for this year. So that's all I have. I'll turn it over to Rachel. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so that kind of takes us to where we are today. As Peter mentioned, we were deeply inspired by the field trip that we all took to Incredible Edible Millbridge. And if you haven't been there, I highly recommend that you take a field trip up there. And we really wanted to bring that concept to Blue Hill. And to create a really accessible space in our community where people could pick fresh, healthy food at no cost. And we were also equally invested in providing a space where people could connect with nature and with food production. And none of this would be possible without all of the many partnerships that we've developed along the way. Notably, of course, is the one with GSA, our town's high school, our region's high school, where the garden is located. And so it's located, like Peter said, right on the lawn next to one of the school's dorms. And so that space is that location is very central in town. It's, right in the middle of town. It's very walkable. And so for all those reasons, we really thought that would make a really great location. There's a parking lot, and we're lucky to be able to use water from the school and also involvement from the students when that's possible. And as Peter also mentioned, our partnership with Healthy Acadia, which I think comes from my role since I work for Healthy Acadia. That partnership helped to connect us to local food assistance programs in the area. And so these organizations helped provide feedback about the project at an early stage and really helped us get the word out to the community. And so a few of these programs include Healthy Peninsula's Magic Food Bus, the Tree of Life Food Pantry, and the Simmering Pot Meal Program. And most of these programs operate within a stone's throw away from the garden. So it just felt like a really natural partnership to make sure that these organizations are aware of what we're doing and that we're collaborating as closely as possible. And then our work with Healthy Acadia also extends to the Down East Gleaning Initiative, which is a program that I run. And this partnership helps to ensure that all the food gets picked and used. And so any food that isn't picked by visiting community members, because it is a pick your own free community garden, gets picked by volunteer gleaners, which then they deliver that food to the programs that I just listed. So that just helps to ensure that any food that isn't getting picked by visitors gets used by people who need it. And just a little bit about the gleaning program. We work with volunteers, farmers, gardeners, and food assistance programs to prevent food waste and to increase access to healthy food for people in our community. This year, we're also really lucky to have the support of UMaine Cooperative Extension's Master Gardener Volunteer Program. A couple of our project members are Master Gardener volunteers, and we're just, really grateful to have that, that support in the garden. And so, I just named a lot of different organizations and partnerships, and I'm sure it's not easily digestible, but I hope at the very least it just demonstrates how important partnerships are for projects like this, and how, we just really wouldn't have gotten to where we are today without all of these collaborations. So last year was our first year of production. We grew, it's a little hard to estimate exactly how much food the garden produced, because like we said, it's based on the Incredible Edible model, which is like a free pick your own model of gardening. So volunteers grow all the food, and anyone and everyone is allowed to come by and pick food when it's ready to be harvested. And so for that reason, it's a little hard to say exactly how many pounds of food came out of the garden, but we estimate between 600 to 800 pounds. So, and given that it was our first year, we feel really good about that. And also the soil there, while the location is great for the reasons I described earlier, the soil does present a little bit of a challenge. It's very clay based, and so we kind of had our work cut out for us in terms of improving the soil structure and making it a little bit more hospitable to vegetable production. So this year we hope to grow just as much, if not more, food for the community. In this, 600 to 800 pounds, we grew over 60 varieties of plants, which included vegetables, different types of herbs, flowers, and native perennial plants. And then in terms of like how we grow the food, we grow it as organically as possible, or we grow it naturally. We don't use any synthetic fertilizers or pesticides or anything like that. Instead, we try to grow healthy crops by building healthy soil. And we do this through the application of compost and cover crops and mulch. And other than the initial tilling of the plot, in fall of 2019, when we had to get rid of the lawn that's there, we don't till the beds. And so those are just a few of the ways that we really try to work on building healthy soil, and in turn we hope to grow healthy plants, and therefore we don't need to use applications like that, fertilizers, etc. So and as I mentioned, we obviously grow a lot of vegetables, but in addition to that, we do grow flowers, and we have some perennial plants around the border of the garden. And while vegetables will always, be 95% of what we grow, we think it's equally important to provide flowering plants for pollinators and for folks who want to come by and pick and flowers and make bouquets and take them home, which we noticed people were doing, which is lovely. And then something else that's really notable about this project, and I guess another example of some of the partnerships that we've developed is that in the last year, the Incredible Edible Down East Network has formed, and this is made up of a few different sites across Hancock County and in Washington County. And so there's our site at the Blue Hill Community Garden, and there's also one at the Bucksport Health Center. There's one, I believe, in Winter Harbor. It might be that they're starting kind of the vegetable boxes on like Main Street or something like that, like how we started, but I can't be sure. And then there's obviously the one in the two in Millbridge, which are kind of like the inspiration for all of us. And then there's talk of some forming in Machias as well. And so we thought it would be great to form a network, and I know Healthy Acadia is helping to coordinate that in partnership with the folks who run Incredible Edible Millbridge. So just wanted to share that so folks know that like this kind of movement is growing, and literally, and we might see more and more gardens like this popping up in our communities, which is great. And so, yeah, I guess, I think if it's not already clear, our goals with the garden are really twofold. So there's the very sort of obvious goal that we're trying to achieve by producing free, healthy food for the community. But we also, I think what's equally important for us is to be able to provide an opportunity for people to learn how to grow food and to develop relationships with plants and see how their food is grown, and also to connect with others who are interested in the same thing. And so all of those things have really important health benefits as well, and really, I think, help us build stronger and healthier communities too. And so we've been trying to also achieve that goal through by engaging volunteers and coordinating educational opportunities. And so Hillary is going to talk a little bit more about that in terms of how we engage the community. And yeah, so I'll pass it off to Hillary.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, and I love what you said about the garden is more than just to grow food. It's to grow community too. And that is why everyone should come to the garden. It is always open. You don't have to come on a volunteer time to come into the garden. You can come at any time to walk around. You can bring a friend. Like what can we do in the days of COVID? Well, the garden's still open, and you can walk the grounds and discuss the way we are growing, whether you like it or not. You can talk about it with your friends. There's nothing to pick now, but it's fun to see stuff starting to grow. Even after the light snows we've had these past couple weeks, stuff's still growing, so it's exciting. You can see the seaweed that we use is still on the beds, and a lot of stuff is growing right up through the seaweed still. And we're going to keep the seaweed there to use as mulch, and it'll continue to nourish the soil. So, and there's cover crop that has died off. That's kind of interesting to see too, that also is serving as a mulch now. So we're trying a lot of different things, and it's fun to see. I moved up to Maine from Florida 4 years ago, and I didn't garden much except for a few herbs. And so when I got up here and I just driving down the road, you see gardens everywhere. Is what I loved about Maine. And so I had to get in on it. And I see Val is on here, and she dragged me into, yeah, I'm calling you out. She dragged me into the garden club. And then I went on the Millbridge trip with the rest of the crew as a field trip with the garden club. And yeah, we had to do it. Once you see it, it was beautiful, and like anyone can come and pick food, and yeah, and people actually do this, and yeah, they do. And then I go online and I learned that it's like a massive movement, and it's happening in Europe, and there's even towns in Europe where people come to visit just to go and tour all the gardens that are all over the place that are open for anyone to pick from anytime. And it's like a walking tourist attraction. So it's kind of fun. Like the possibilities are endless, and it can go in any direction from here on out. There's so much potential. So by no means are we like set in this is what it is right now. So yeah, it's a fun thing to be a part of, and if you have ideas, come tell us. We'd love to hear them. So back to my script. That was off script. We have plenty of time for me to go off script. So
We do. Yeah.
So I'm a stay-at-home mom. I used to be an elementary school teacher before I moved to Maine. And now we have two kids, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, who love coming to the garden. Even though we have our own garden, they definitely prefer to come to the community garden. I don't know, they like seeing people, they like knowing the food's being helpful. I don't know what it is. They get to run down the rows. That's fun too. My son found a little cave in, I think they were cosmos flowers last year, that he liked to hide in. I guess it got a little hot out there. But there's a picnic table for them to snack while we're working. Anyways, they love it there. So let me talk to you a little bit about the volunteer hours last year. We logged people that came logged 650 volunteer hours, and that was setting up the garden. So that was a little more work last year, but there's always more to do. So I expect we'll be about the same this year. And that was even during COVID. We had that much volunteer hours, and it just felt so good to get out there and do something productive when everything was closed down and so much uncertainty. Just getting out and gardening was just like a really nice mind break. And yeah, so that was great, and it'll be great again for this summer, getting out. We had, those 650 volunteer hours were split between 32 volunteers. So you see 4 of us here, but we're just a small number of the people who helped grow food last year. We had 2 high school classes involved and 1 intern. Also, in 2019, the garden club planted the raised beds on Main Street with the consolidated school. It's a little hard last year to connect with all the schools, but we do hope to this year, next year, get all the schools involved because we're so close to them. It's a good opportunity. Yeah, so when you come and volunteer, if you're thinking about it, some of those volunteer hours were spent doing soil preparation, starting seeds, planting, watering, weeding, mowing, harvesting, building the fence in the tool shed, grant writing, communications, publicity, event planning, and volunteer coordination. So even if you're not, necessarily wanting to dig in a garden, there's still definitely other ways that we could use help. So let us know. We have educational partnerships with GSA and Nature Links, as well as Rachel mentioned, the Master Gardener program through the University of Maine. So me being part of the garden last year really taught me how little I knew that and having my own garden. And I wanted to learn more. So I did sign up to be a master, to do the Master Gardener program, and I'm in it right now. As well as another friend I met in the garden. So that's kind of cool. So now I get to do my volunteer hours for that at this garden. So that's kind of cool that we have that partnership as well. So I'm going to talk about what my kids do at the garden. Just in case you're thinking about bringing your kids, they're very welcome. It's not like a garden that's perfect or can't be a little bit messed up. That's something I always worry about bringing my kids. Like, are they going to be like a bull in a china shop? Like, they're young and they're wild and they're curious, and that's okay. It's okay if some leaves come off something that they're not supposed to come off of, or something gets picked a little early. Like, it's all part of the learning process. And I'm going to tell another story about how sometimes we mess up, and it's okay. So we were pulling out the plants that were last fall, and Rachel pulled up a pepper plant, and the roots were all bound. Like, it was like, it came straight out of the pot in the ground. It was in the ground for like 3 months, and we pulled it out, and Rachel's like, oh, wow, that's really shows the importance of, you know, like having to break the roots or not planting root bound roots, because it didn't grow at all. It just stayed in the thing. And I didn't tell Rachel this at the time, but I think I planted that, and I did not like break the roots. And she she was so sweet about it. She wasn't just like, somebody didn't know what they were doing, but she was just like, oh, like, you know, if you always break the roots and you always do it the right way, you don't know how important it is to, so anyways, it was just her, a sweet, Rachel took it really sweet. I messed up, and she was just like, I remember doing it too, because I was talking to someone, and I remember planting that and not breaking the roots a little bit to give them space to grow. And I realized it when I got home, and I was thinking about it. I was like, I'm sure it'll be fine. Well, it wasn't fine. And now we know it wasn't fine. So anyways, sometimes adults make mistakes, and that's okay. And it's okay if kids come and make mistakes too. You can learn from everything. And that's the point of the garden. It's kind of gardening for any garden, I guess. So my boys really loved finding the bugs. They didn't want to touch the bugs, but since we're an organic garden, sometimes we have bugs on the plants that aren't supposed to be there. And so last year we had these beautiful bugs on the potatoes, and they were bright orange, like kind of a coral color, that would hide under the leaves. And my kids were the perfect height to find them for us. So yeah. Kids are always welcome. So we just pick them off and put them in a cup of soapy water. And that we did that we were there a couple times a week doing that just for fun. So we'll find something for every kid that comes to do to feel helpful. And every adult too. So and it does make an impact on kids, because in the dead of winter, my 2-year-old puts on my boots that I wear to the garden, and he announces that he's going to the community garden with snow covering the ground. And he grabs my gloves from the closet and walks outside and starts digging in the snow with my massive rain boots on. And so he knows that the community garden is something that mommy does, and but he was excited about it even in January. So I thought that was super cute. Yeah, just to reiterate, the garden is always open. You can always come and harvest. You can always come and walk through. You can always come and have a picnic at the picnic table. Just make sure the gate is closed. The gate is for keeping the deer out, not the people out. So even if you're just walking by, as so many people do, just stop by and come on in. It's okay. We just ask that any work done on the garden is done as a community. So that's, again, Peter mentioned it, but I'll mention it again. Wednesdays at 4. We'll probably just be doing watering for the next couple weeks at that time. And Saturdays at 10. That's when, oh, and speaking of Saturdays at 10, we have a huge delivery of compost this week. We have 2 yards of it coming to be spread that we will need help with. So if you or you know someone who likes to use a wheelbarrow and spread some compost, this is a great weekend to get started. And yeah, get to know people at the garden. Where am I on time? I think I'm good. Okay, so when you come to the garden, there are a few things we ask of you. If you're volunteering, since it's COVID, we will ask for your name and number, just for tracking purposes. But if you're just coming into the garden, we don't need to know about it. We just ask if you do harvest food, you use the logbook, and you just have to write what you took and how much, just so we know, so we can kind of keep track for future grants of how much we grew. But you don't have to like write your name when you take stuff or anything like that. It can be completely anonymous. And like Rachel was saying, that people took flowers and they would be like, they would just write a beautiful bouquet, thank you so much. And that made us happy to read in the notes too, as well as some artwork that was drawn. So we love to see people using the garden, even if we don't see you in the garden. Yeah, so ways to stay connected. We're on Instagram and Facebook, Blue Hill Community Garden. If you want to sign up, if you're an email kind of person, we do send out an email with the garden club, which has updates about the community garden in it. So we can get you on that list. And we'll have updates periodically in the weekly packet. So look for us there too. Also, one of our most loyal volunteers found us by just driving by. He stopped by and said, hello, what are you doing here? And we just explained to him that we're here at this time doing work on the garden for anyone to come pick from. And he was like, oh, that's cool. Can I help? And he said, sure. And he's been coming ever since. Shout out to Sam. Yeah. So, yeah, just like Peter said, we're going to do 15-minute little lessons on Saturdays to start off. And then we'll have volunteer time after that. Yeah. And I do have some pictures before the questions, maybe, if we have some questions. We do.
Hillary, I don't know at what point you wanted to share your photos or if you'd been planning to do that earlier. But we can do that, or we can do questions, whatever we want to do.
I don't think there are many questions, but if you have questions, why don't you work on those while I show the pictures?
Yeah, I think if folks want to just start typing your questions into the chat, then Callie can read them out after we look at these lovely slides from Hillary.
Okay. And these are all pictures I took last year. So here are the boxes on Main Street. Those two are for anyone to pick from. I got a pepper walking by last year, which was nice. And this is the Consolidated School helping plant the boxes in 2019, pre-COVID. That's why there's no mask. This is a beautiful space at Millbridge that we were so inspired by, and you can see why. This was just one of the gardens. I think they had two that we visited that day. And here's the group that went to view them all. And this was how it started. This was just after we tilled in 2019. It was just lawn before this. And they went from lawn to a beautiful place to gather and grow food. And here are these seedlings. Okay, so you don't even have to be local to help with the garden. So if you're an out of towner, you're still welcome. These were grown by someone who came up here, was staying in an Airbnb, who grew these for us during COVID. Shout out to Jason, if he's still here. Those were his. This was the best part. I think this was the best day. We had 8-year-olds, we had 28-year-olds, we had 38-year-olds, 48-year-olds, and like somebody from like every decade here building the shed. I wish I had more pictures of it. It was really great. We had a lot of people there for that. Here are people just coming to harvest. Some of the beautiful vegetables we grew. There's a nice shot of the garden. And again, we have a sign here that says Blue Hill Garden Club, but I hope we made it clear. It's started by the Blue Hill Garden Club, but it's for everyone.
It's such a beautiful site. It's just a pleasure to just be there. Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. If you have any sort of stress, if you just walk the rows, you'll feel a little bit better, maybe like 10% or something. This is me and my son Eli. And we had an open garden day. And this was Lily handing out seeds, native seeds that she had saved. More kids in the garden. That's my other son, pulling weeds and bringing them to a big pile. And this is the crew starting it off with leaves and manure, spreading it around in fall of 2019. And that's all.
Super. So Callie, did you want to read out the questions folks have been asking in the chat, or do you want me to do that?
I can do that. Yes, thank you very much. Yes, this was a great idea to show the pictures and have people have some time to think about their questions. One is, how much trouble do you have with deer and other pests? And that may be for Peter, both Peter and Rachel, I think.
Okay, we don't have any trouble with deer because we built a deer fence surrounding the property, and we have, as far as I know, we haven't had any trouble with any other pests, except for bugs, which Hillary described very well. But no problems.
And I guess, Rachel, we're really trying to focus on organic solutions, aren't we? So Hillary said for potato bugs, it's the soapy water. Are there other bugs that we have organic solutions for?
Oh gosh. I'm a little self-conscious. I feel like there are much more experienced gardeners here than me, but yeah, I mean, yes, there are. I can't really think of any that we used in the garden this past year, but maybe we'll have to reach into our toolkits and employ, more forms of pest control. But as Hillary mentioned, yeah, we just did the sort of like physical removal of the potato beetles last year, which I think for a lot of like organic growers tends to be, if depending on how many potatoes you're growing, tends to be the, one of a method to use. We did have some aphids on our kale towards the end of the summer, which I heard from a lot of folks around the area that they dealt with the same thing in their gardens. And, it was definitely a very dry year. And so I think whenever the plants are stressed, they're more susceptible to pests and diseases. So we certainly didn't have that going for us either, but a lot of volunteer hours were spent watering. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question, how much money has been raised for the garden and what kinds of things has it been spent on? Maybe that one's for Peter.
Oh, gosh. Um,
Peter, I can help if you.
I think you've muted yourself again, Peter.
oh, sorry. I don't have the figures on my mind. I'm not very good at remembering figures. Maybe Rachel, do you have an idea?
Yes. So I think we've raised a little over $6,000 between, like Peter said, New England Grassroots Fund, Maine Farmland Trust has a grant program specifically for Blue Hill Peninsula food access projects. And then we also, 2 years in a row, applied for funding through seed money, which is sort of like a crowd fundraising online platform. And then we also, obviously get some support through the Blue Hill Garden Club and through community donations. So of that, 6,200, we've spent about 2,700. A lot of, we try to get in-kind donations. Hammond has been very generous with, by providing a discount for some of our purchases. And, a lot of the things that we've had to build have been built by volunteers. And so we were able to scrap it together. But if people want to donate, there's information on how to do that on the Blue Hill Garden Club's website, which I will put the link to that in the chat. But Peter, someone also asked about fruit trees. I think you planted some fruit trees outside of the garden a while back, right?
Yeah, so, oh gosh, it must have been 4 years ago that GSA said it would be, or we suggested that it might be nice to have fruit trees all up and down the road. And they certainly agreed. And we planted, I think, 15 fruit trees of various kinds, mostly apple. And they're all heritage apples from this area, which is kind of neat. So we haven't gotten any apples yet because we just basically planted the seedlings or a 1 year tree. So it'll be a while before we start getting apples. But anyway.
Thank you. And they're beautiful. It's so wonderful to walk down and see the trees. They're doing very well. There's another question about how do we choose what vegetables to grow? And I think that's probably a Rachel question, although everybody should chime in.
Yeah, well, last year was sort of, it was our first year. And so I think we grew, well, we did ask Tree of Life Food Pantry what types of vegetables their customers like to eat, because we did really want to make sure that folks who are in need of produce are accessing the garden as well. We want to make sure everybody is accessing the garden. So we tried to do some research on which crops were most popular across the board. And so we definitely grew like the classics. We kind of grew a little bit of everything last year. Like I said, over 60 varieties. So we took a lot of notes during last year's growing season and really tried to choose a little bit more. We just tried to be a little bit more selective this year and choose what grew well and what was picked the most. So tomatoes were obviously a very popular one. Peas. We grow a lot of herbs. Some things didn't do as well, like peppers. Although Hillary's story made me laugh because the garden is such a free for all. Like there's no judgment in there, and you also there's so many people involved. You don't have any idea who did what, and so I think we're always going to run into those sort of moments, but that's a really funny story, Hillary. So peppers didn't do the best there. And, some crops like, cauliflower, they tend to take up a lot of real estate, but, they're sort of like a one and done plant. And so we're trying to think of plants that can be picked multiple times. It can really they really have the most bang for their buck, I guess, given how much space they take up in the garden. Things like kale and chard were very popular. So we're growing more of those, more greens and lots of lettuce. So we really just tried to take careful notes last year, and then we're just learning as we go and selecting the crops that people want. So yeah, but Hillary and Peter, do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, I think I'll add that it's something that we're going to continue to change. We had a plan before COVID hit, and we did change it a little bit just because we figured grow more of the basics. And we might do that again this year instead of growing the interesting things that people might like to learn how to grow, that are a little bit different to the area that we were kind of thinking before. So yeah, if you have something you want us to grow, let us know.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add.
Yeah, well, that was a good question.
I know we're trying to keep a notebook with what grew well. Not only what grew well, what demanded a whole lot of attention, what grew well and liked being here, because it's always nice to find plants that really love where they are and don't require a lot of extra. The other piece of this, I think, too, is what is popular in the community, because if people don't like or don't know how to fix certain vegetables, then it doesn't really matter how much we can grow. So all of those pieces come together in figuring out what we're going to grow.
Yeah, that actually just reminded me, Callie, we did also meet with the dorm students next door and ask them what they would like to see grown in the garden, since they're the closest neighbors. And so we got a lot of input from them. And we also did some, I think like we did a survey on Facebook, I think. So we really like every step of the way, we really try to have the garden reflect what the community wants. Like we don't want to, I don't think, go in. I mean, everyone kind of wants to do that, go in and do exactly what you want, but that's not really what we're doing here. It's, we're just trying to, as over time, mold it and shape it to be something that really is a reflection of the community. And so, yeah, like Hillary said, we're always looking for input. And especially if you want to grow seedlings for us and help and transplant it into the garden, you're more than welcome to do that too. And Regina just popped in the chat the incredible edible Down East network that I had mentioned earlier. And this is my first time seeing it. It looks awesome. This is on the it's the Women's Healthy Rural. Oh, it's the Women's Health Resource Library, I think.
Women for Healthy Rural Living is the.
Thank you. Thanks, Regina.
Organization, yes.
So that's the organization that that started the incredible edible Millbridge project. So this is so great to see, and I hope it provides inspiration for folks that are here tonight.
We have a question about how did the potatoes do, the bugs notwithstanding, and thanks to Eli for managing and getting them into the soapy water. Potatoes, how did they do?
Oh, that was the other part of the fun, was finding like the treasure of the potatoes buried. They did well. They did well. Yeah, they made it through.
They should, really, they should. But yes, it's nice to know that they did. And how about, another question, how about growing mushrooms?
Ooh, that would be a cool thing to learn. I have no experience with that yet.
Yeah, that's it's not something we've discussed. I feel like you need pretty specific conditions for growing mushrooms. But it's the type of, activity that I think the garden could like host as an educational workshop, like bring someone in that really knows about it. There's a business, there's a farm on MDI called Middle Earth Mushrooms. And I know that they've done some workshops. And so I would look them up. They're a great local business. And so even if it's not something that we would do, I can see us like partnering with a farmer like them and having them, come to the garden and host a workshop. So yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Another question, is there any desire to expand the size of the garden, and do we have more room to expand?
Well,
I guess I mean, I'm always for bigger gardens, but I think there is room to expand. But I think this year we may think about that next winter, but I think this year we're concentrated on what we have and making the most of what we have.
Great, and I don't see any more questions. A chance for a last round of questions from the attendees.
How can folks get in touch with you guys? What's the best way if people think of questions later? Should they send you guys an email?
yes.
Sure.
Yes, they should. Let's see there, Hillary's going to put her email in the chat. And we have a Facebook page. So I think you should either email Hillary and Callie are both kind of keeping tabs on the volunteer recruitment and engagement. So folks can definitely reach out to one of them, and then, message us on Facebook. That's another great way to stay
I
engaged.
pay attention to Instagram a little bit more than Facebook, I'll say. So Facebook might be a couple weeks before I check that, if you're in a hurry. Maybe
Great
don't.
to know. Yeah, Hillary's also the person behind the social media accounts, and I think Susan Brookman too helps with the Facebook page. So shout out to you guys for doing that.
We are a multi-generational club. So for those of us who use Instagram, that's great. Facebook, that's great. And then even the telephone, that could work, or actually stopping by the garden. So we are available all the time.
Yes. Yeah, we'll be there this Saturday starting at 10 if you want to come and help us move some compost around.
This has been what there's a wonderful comment that maybe we could close with to everybody, which says, thanks so much for all the work getting it set up and also for tonight's program. I'm looking forward to meeting some of you there and getting my hands dirty. And that's what it is, huh?
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, I just want to remind folks we've got one more event in this gardening series between the library and the garden club coming up next week. We'll have Molly and Tim from 5 Star Orchard and Nursery to talk about their wonderful fruit trees and growing heritage fruits. So if you haven't signed up for that yet, you can do that on our calendar and join us again next week. But thanks to all our presenters for tonight. I'll stop the recording now.